hurino tēnei te whare nei, ko te raukura I tū mai, me hea tūrā ki o koutou. Nau mai, ara mai, wakatau mai ki roto I tēnei. I rungi I tēnei mai ngā maunga. No reira, te mea te piaia te koutou ki haere mai I rungi I tēnei. No reira, tēnā koutou tātou. No reira, mauri mai o koutou tini, me ngā mano. I whikangi o koutou tēnei rā, me rātou haere ki pō, no reira me mihi atu ki rā. E te moe o koutou kua I rā. I tēnei te rangi nei, te wiki te marama, no reira haere atu rā koutou, haere atu rā koutou. Me kātira, tēnā te pōro kianga o mātou nei, ki mihi atu ki a rātou, haere atu rā, haere atu rā, haere atu rā. I rungi te wakatau nei, te mihi atu ki tēnei te whaiwhai nei, ki te pirimia, me mihi atu ki a. Tānu te mihi ki a koe, nau mai, ara mai ki roto I te whare nei, I tū mai. Me kōrua, ngā minita Tolly, ngā minita Adams, ngā minita I mihi atu o koe. Te te rā ki tēnei, te kaiwaka haere o te rā, e ira tānui tēnei tēnei. Kare he tau hau ki a mātou nei, I ngā wā, e whahuria tēnei, no reira tēnei te mihi ki a koe. Me a koutou hoki, mai te mutu nei, huri no, whakahiti ati rā ki te waitaunangu, me te ao, no reira, nau mai. I rungi te kaupapa te rā, te koutou, te pōrero, te runga te kaupapa, no reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou tātou. Ko mutu nei, welcome to te raukura, whare E tū nei, te hāra, Wanganui ātara, ngā mountains, te tū mai, te koutou, what you come here for, no reira, nau mai. Nau mai hoki I rungi tēnei te āhutanga o Puanga, ko tēnei Matariki, te haere mai nei, no reira, tēnā koutou, koe a hui no tātou.
E rere rā te motu nei I roto ko ia o pari akana tō ura e waka. Te mai ngā tikanga I tere pai ai te motu nei. Tō piki tanga kai te pure poto e ke tanga kai toro anui ki a waka rongo koe ki te reka mai o te kōrero ei. Mātau tonu au ki a koe to ue te ngākau waka poke tonu me a ia e mauru e ko te au ka weru a ka momotu e iu ana kai te uru e kai te tonga ka ara mai ki roto ka kōhari.
Ki hono, ka tātai hono, rātou, ai te pō, ai te rātou. Ko mātu nei mahu nei, no reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, kua tui I tēnei. Te ao koe I tēnei whare.
Kia ora tātou. Kia ora tātou e whakawhaiti runga te karanga o tēnei kaupapa hohonu kei mui a tātou. Greetings as we gather together to discuss and deliberate on this very important topic. Engari te tuatahi kia huri kia koutou o te hati awa, kia koe hoki Mark. Nau nei tukuna te arawhata ki te rungarawa, tēnā koe mo tēnā. Me koe kōrua tahi I hara mai ki te mihi whakatau, kia mātau I hara mai nei runga te karanga o te kaupapa, tēnā kōrua. I just wanted to greet Mark, who said the opening prayer, and Te Atiawa, who welcomed us here this morning. Nō reira, tēnā kōrua, tēnā kōrua. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koe te Premier, me ngā minita tokoru e hara mai tō taha, I runga te karanga o tēnei kaupapa. I also welcome and greet the Prime Minister and Ministers Adam and Tolly. Nō reira, tēnā tātou katoa, te mininga koutou I hara mai nei, I runga te karanga, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Greetings everybody, my name is Wira Gardner, and from those lofty surrounds of greetings I go to housekeeping, which I'm required to do, by the way, as I understand it. The venue is non-smoking. And I'll read it out to make sure I don't leave anything out. If the fire alarm goes off, please evacuate through the marked exits. One over there, without using the lifts. That will be very difficult. Staff will assist you if you're looking for the lift. And we'll meet in Odland Square on the harbour side. If there's an earthquake, drop, cover and hold. I think some of you have difficulty getting under those chairs, but nevertheless, that's the rule. And then stay inside till the shaking stops and then move out. Switch your phones to silent. The fine for a phone going during the day will be $10 to my kohanga reo in Whakatane. And you can give that to the Honourable Anne Tolley, that's her electorate, or the Honourable Tūrero Flavel, which is his electorate as well. Timings are tight. Quote the hepara. I'm the shepherd, and my job will be to move you around and to make sure things go smoothly. Koena nohil, that's all. Before I ask the Prime Minister to address us, can I just go through and make a couple of observations? There are three things important of this gathering in this room. The first of those reasons is that you're all experts in the knowledges that you possess. And I would imagine that the reason that you're sitting here is because you are either the preeminent expert or one of the leading experts on the function or the area that you're responsible for. So I acknowledge you for that. The second reason you're in this room is you each, and amongst you in your groups, are significant influences on the way in which policies are implemented, developed and carried out. So with expertise and with influence, one has to ask the fundamental question, why we're still coming to meetings of this kind. And in my view, it is not appropriate anymore to have linear, cumulative changes to the systems and the challenges that we face in our society. And my daughter, I was talking to her about what I should say last night. I said, Dad, why don't you talk in the language that we talk? So in the technology age, we're talking about disruptive technologies, we're talking about asymmetrical change, and we're talking about this fascinating thing called the Internet of Everything, which means that in the next decade there'll be trillions of pieces of data circulating the world, and the challenge for the people around that is to bring that data together to resolve the issues that confront that particular set of data. We can use all that, but ultimately we have to come down to using the top 2 inches of our head and the attitudes that reside within each of us. We've gone too far not to go a little bit further, and we've met too often not to meet once more. But nevertheless, it is not good for a civil society to continue to meet on these kinds of challenges which confront us. And I want to, I've just adapted a little bit of a saying, a quote from Nelson Mandela, which I think encapsulates what I foresee us tackling today. And he said that there can be no keener veneration of a society's soul, revelation of a society's soul, than the way in which it treats its vulnerable. And I think a civil society has a deep obligation to address those matters, to confront them, and to communicate with them, and more importantly, to resolve them. And in a sense, that's what we're doing here today. We're gathered together to try to identify strategies that will make not linear, cumulative step changes, but asymmetrical changes that are necessary to break the cycles that you know about better than I do, and the Prime Minister and the ministers know better out for the policy point of view than I do. Nevertheless, ka te tawa māku e naine, that's all I want to say at this stage. That's a little bit of a coho sermon. Nevertheless, what I'm saying, as a non-expert in this area, but someone who's been in the community for a long time and spans across the disciplines that we'll be going to talk about today, including I have to go for a deaf check sometime next week in Gisborne, which means I'm moving into the geriatric disability arena, so I'm going to take a keen interest, Sue, in what you're going to say in your workshop. Nō reira, ka te tawa māku e naine. Thank you very much, and I'll ask the Prime Minister to address us. Ian.
Ki ngā tangata whenua te Aotearoa, e mihi na nui ki te ui whānui. Tēnā tātou e pai nei ki tēnei kura, te kura whawhai, e te whawhai pai mō te whakapono. Mihi mai i te huatanga ki a rātou kua wetu rangatia. Kia tau ana hoki ki a tātou ngā manakitanga i te atua tihei mauri ora. Thank you very much for the excuse me, opportunity to come along and talk to this meeting. We are here to change lives. The point of further discussion, meeting once again when you've met so many times, is to push further again to change what we can change about the impact of family violence in our community. I'm not going to go through all the statistics, you know those, and the ministers will cover the relevant statistics. But I think the experience of so many people of family violence means that we know well the impact of the actual violence and, of course, the longer-term impact of the fear of it, which warps personalities and destroys relationships. I've come along to support our ministers, and I want to acknowledge Minister Adams and Minister Tolley, who have over the last few years, I think, realised the sustained intensity that it takes to change something in a public sector, in a public service. I'm sure 2.5 years ago or 3 years ago when they started out on this road together, they may not have imagined how long it was and how many steep climbs there are in it. But I do want to acknowledge their strong personal commitment to finding their way through, and as appropriate to the role of minister, through what the government policy actually is, finding out what actually happens, which is quite often different from what people think happens, and then getting into the challenging process of changing in the first place how government behaves. And along the way they've persuaded their colleagues of the importance of this work and the role that the broader cabinet can play in it. I just wanted to describe a bit where it fits in the broader approach of government to dealing with social issues, because what we're finding is this a lot of similarity in the toolkit that we can use. We've taken a pretty straightforward view that about 80% of what government does in providing social-related services or human services works reasonably well. The provision of our mass education system, most health services, although all of them can improve. But about 20% of what we do doesn't work, and 20% is a big chunk. Around a quarter of everything in the economy is the services government provides to people. So it's a quarter of all the buildings, cars, IT systems, and people employed are providing publicly funded services. So how they work matters a lot. So we've tried to do a couple of different things to deal with hardcore, sustained social problems which have proven to be almost impervious to the standard public policy toolkit of writing a strategy. And that's about it. So we have these things called better public services results. And the point of those, which you can look at on the website, and I won't go into detail, is to put ourselves to the test of whether we're actually changing something for someone. And in that context, I use a word which people don't like, which jars with them, but it's the word customer. We don't want customers, but unfortunately we have thousands of them. And the reason I use that word is because any discussion we have about a public service has to be focused on the people for whom the service exists. And that is not the provider, not the agency, not the minister. The service is not a vehicle for winning political favour. It's a vehicle for changing lives of people who don't come to our workshops and our seminars and our cabinet meetings, people living not in government departments, not in segments of their lives, but as families, dysfunctional communities, relationships at work or don't work, or all too often these days simply on their own. So we try to put ourselves to the test by having the discussion about what it is we actually think should change. And over the last 5 years, we've had some significant success. And we now have 60,000 fewer children in a benefit-dependent household than 5 years ago. We now have thousands more young Māori and Pacifica getting their NCA level 2. We thought that should change. It's gone from 53% to 74% over 5 years. A silent revolution, because thousands of them now get to the start line for the better kind of life that many of them would, many of their families would like to see. We put ourselves to the test on tough ones like rheumatic fever, the incidence of physical violence for children, which we've been able to stop rising but haven't been able to get down yet. And in answering those questions about what it is we really want to change, we've become much more aware and understanding of the the pervasiveness of and the long-term nature of the hardcore social dysfunction that for a number of generations we simply haven't changed much. Along the way, we've developed a toolkit that enables us to see much better what the problem is. You might have heard the term social investment. It can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. But for me, it boils down to three simple questions. Which people where? Even the category family violence is more about the agency and the providers who deliver it. It doesn't tell us which people where. We can't help Māori youth. That is a statistical category. We need to know actually which ones. Which people in which suburb. We don't need to know their names, of course, and privacy and all that. But if you think about it that way, it's a much more focused discussion because you've changed nothing until you know which people you think you're trying to change. The second question is who has a connection with them? In the arena of family violence, we know that a big part of it is that we don't know about a whole lot of the family violence that happens. Because why would you tell a government agency or a policeman? They don't trust us, particularly if they're people with a lot of interaction with the government system. So we can't deal with people with whom we have no relationship. And time and again we're finding that a barrier to the delivery of service to those who most need it, in that 20%, is not more money. It is often simply lack of trust. They don't trust us, and our good intentions are irrelevant if they don't trust us. So we have to find who has a relationship with them, and it won't be a policy analyst. Occasionally, and public service bureaucracies, structured as they have to be, are not designed to ferret out the subtlety of a relationship in a particular street with a particular household. And that is why everyone needs each other. because that's a bit we can't buy. We can buy a lot of stuff, and we do, often quite effectively, but we can't buy that bit. And then the third question is, how do we know we made any difference? Because it's easy in the provision of service as it is in a dysfunctional family or community to create codependency, and that is we need the misery. And you can feed off each other. And sometimes on my worst days, I think we spend billions servicing misery rather than trying to reduce it. So we've got to put ourselves to that test. Having got the relationship, having got alongside someone, have we actually changed something? Or are we cruising along here, just keeping people's head above water? I keep getting my revenue. It's interesting work. How do we get that customer off our books? Because actually that's success. Success is having less to do. The opposite of business, where success is having more of them. We want less of them. And that's not an easy incentive, actually, to get to grips with when we've organised ourselves as if there's endless misery. Well, what you're doing here today is grappling with the proposition that we can have less family violence, that we don't have to accept it as a feature of our community, as some kind of state of nature which we all have to tolerate. So what I hope comes out of today is some real pressure on us. We're getting better, or the system, the public service is getting better at dealing with the reality of service delivery and getting that to shape policy. And your discussion today, which is with people who have committed their professional and personal lives to establishing the relationship of trust and changing people's lives, feeding back to the system what it needs to do. And the system needs that external pressure. There's just a whole lot of things that policymakers do know that other people don't know about how public policy works, but there's a whole lot of things we just can't know. And we need that external pressure. It's a vital source of change. And my favourite story about how things can change, or one of my favourites, I get so many inspiring and frustrating individual stories, is a video I saw of a guy in Palmerston North talking about the fact that his household had been 87 domestic violence call-outs in a year. And eventually someone figured out that maybe we should change this. A weekly call-out to the house for domestic violence. And you'd think after the first 25 times, we might have thought, is this going to happen again? Is there anything we can do? You might have thought after 50 times we'd do it. The problem is we've got the resource and the capacity to do it 87 times without thinking. Eventually someone said this should stop. And they took the necessary steps, which were as simple as finding the person who could influence this guy. He talked about it. And he was on the video saying, well, I've worked out there's better ways of dealing with my issues. And I was thinking, well, thank God for that. Took a while. And the next year they had one call out. Fantastic example of what can change. So we have to be straight up and honest about it. So don't hold back in the discussion that you have today. And often it won't be the policy, it's the simple things you understand. One of the things I've noticed from all the case studies I see, and every week I'm getting case studies because that's how I can understand whether we're actually making a difference, is timeliness. Often the simplest, best thing we are doing, and you are doing, is being there on time, at the time that it matters, instead of a week later or a month later or 6 weeks later. And this seems to be part of the impact of the pilots that our ministers and Amy is overseeing in Christchurch and in Hamilton is simply dealing with the issue at the time with serious intent to change something. And of course, to achieve that, the whole system has to change. The way it contracts, the way it writes policy, the way it funds. So we're very much looking forward to hearing from you, and I will ask our ministers how the feedback went, because we are very committed to seeing this through. This isn't an election year talk. We've been on a at least 2 or 3 years pathway here, in fact going back to Paula Bennett when she was Minister of Social Welfare. And we're not stopping just because there's an election. We're keeping on going because we know that having an impact is going to take some years of change. And I suppose that's my final point. I remember sitting through a discussion a few years ago about the tension between, I think it was police and nurses and teachers in the context of children's teams, about what constituted the presentation of child abuse. And they all, shockingly to a politician, it turned out they did not have a common view of what that was. I just sort of assumed everyone would professionally have a view, that a workforce that's trained would understand it. And this discussion went on and on and on and on and on over months. And I remember saying one day to a meeting somewhere, I think officials, well, I wish they'd just have it outside the household where the kid's screaming from getting beaten up. And that might sharpen up our focus on resolving our own little issues. So we're asking people who have been in long-term violent relationships to change their lives, to get out of that situation, to abandon the things they know for a completely unknown world. And it's amazing how often people have the courage to change their lives, whether it's 14-year-olds with real problems or 35-year-old women with 5 kids being beaten up. Sometimes we need to show that courage by changing things in our lives when we've got suits and jobs and go to work safe every day. So there's no real barriers here to what can change. There's really only the effort that you can all put in to make it change. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Thanks, Prime Minister, for that opening address, which addresses both the headlines around where the government is heading, but more importantly, the practical examples that the PM gave us. And I think the issues around which ones where are very specific questions. I think the issue around success is having fewer people in the area. And I think the issue around there is no reason why we shouldn't change. And it's really the willpower of the group here to address those challenges and to feed back through ministers and through the plenary session this afternoon and hopefully pass those messages on to the Prime Minister. So thanks very much, Prime Minister, for that. I'd like to now invite the Minister of Justice, Honourable Amy Adams, to talk to us. Kia ora, Amy.
Tēnā koutou katoa, me ngā tini ahutanga o te wā, nau mai, haere mai. Good morning. Thank you to Te Atiawa for your welcome, and can I thank the Prime Minister as he departs for his very strong and inspirational opening comments. I also want to thank Sawira for very kindly taking on the role of the Chair of the Summit today, and I also want to acknowledge my ministerial colleague and partner in this journey of trying to reform government's approach to family and sexual violence, Anne Tolley, and in his absence, as he may arrive when I'm speaking, Tōrero Flavel, who's also been a very strong and committed partner. Can also acknowledge my parliamentary colleagues who are here. Can I also give special acknowledgement to our 4 keynote speakers who will help set the tone for what I hope will be some incisive and useful discussion today. But mostly thank you all for being here and the contributions that you make to ensuring New Zealanders are living safer and happier lives. So we live in a country that we can, and I am immensely proud of. New Zealand leads the world in so many ways. We were the first, of course, to give women the vote. We're often recognised as the least corrupt country in the world, and we're regularly voted the world's best country to live in. But for too long, we've also been a world leader when it comes to our reported rate of family violence, with New Zealand police responding to an incident somewhere in the country every 5 minutes. And while family violence occurs across all parts of New Zealand society, for Māori in particular, far too many homes experience violence. That's not what I want any child growing up in this country to see or to experience. And I refuse to accept that this is as good as it can be, and I'm not willing to accept that there should be any level of family violence in the future of Aotearoa. So you've been invited here as government agency representatives, NGOs, support workers, former perpetrators and survivors of family violence, because I know you share our determination to build a better system, and because you all have stories to share and ideas to contribute about how we can better tackle family violence. In working on this challenge, we've already benefited enormously from getting on-the-ground perspectives of those who've been working on the front line, dealing with family violence every day, and many of you are here today. We've also heard from victims who've made brave and personal submissions about their experiences with family violence and the devastating impact it has. And it absolutely does have a devastating impact, not just on the victims, but on society as a whole. It's causing devastating outcomes for our children, increasing the youth suicide rate, costing businesses and lost productivity, and pushing up our prison population. But more than that, it's destroying for many the one thing that we should all have, and that is a family within which we're cherished and loved. We simply can and must do better. So the Prime Minister touched a little bit on the sort of system that we want to get to across our social services as a whole, and I want to spend a bit of time going into, in detail, what I think that looks like in a family violence sense. As we've delved deeper into the issue of family violence over the past couple of years, what we have learnt is that the system to date has tended towards ad hoc, isolated, and incident-based responses that fail to properly understand and respond to the nature of family-based violence as an ongoing pattern of behaviour that needs an integrated and holistic response. Simply viewing family violence as the responsibility of the police or of the criminal justice system will at best stop a perpetrator from being able to cause harm for a short period. We also know that non-aligned responses make it difficult for people to access the help they need. There are too many doors and paths to navigate, so many victims and perpetrators either don't get the right help for their particular need or don't get any help at all. Now, we hear a lot about the high levels of family violence that goes unreported. But in fact, a 2009 report by the University of Auckland researchers Janet Fanslow and Elizabeth Robinson found that almost 77% of women who experienced violence at the hands of their partner had told someone about the violence. But frequently they're telling people outside of what we traditionally think of as the family violence system. Very often they're actually telling family and friends or counsellors and medical staff. In that study, around 58% had only ever told family or friends. 16% had told a counsellor or mental health worker, and 13% had told a doctor or other health worker. Now compare that to the number of women who had told someone in the traditional family violence sector. According to that research, only 13% had told police, and just over 2% had told a women's refuge. Critically, when the women did disclose the violence, far too often no one tried to help, or the help was inadequate. For example, of the 77% of women who did tell someone about the violence they were experiencing, more than 40% said that no one tried to help them. So this means that collectively we've been missing opportunities to help, and help in the right way. So when we hear that statistic that says 2/3 of family violence incidents go unreported, we should bear in mind that actually the majority of victims have talked about their experience of violence by a partner. It's just that across our communities, we don't have the mechanisms in place to ensure that victims are getting the help they need. From what we know, these findings are still relevant today, although we've certainly seen an increase in reporting as a result of heightened awareness and improved practice in the last couple of years. So what it means for us as government agencies, NGOs and support workers, but also as parents, sisters, brothers, friends and neighbours, is that of course we're all responsible for taking action. The onus should not be on the victim, nor left as the job of any one agency. You'll have no doubt heard a lot of talk from us as a government about social investment, and you've heard the Prime Minister talk about this approach this morning. So in my words, put simply, this just means ensuring that we're intervening early, getting the right services to the right people to make the greatest difference. And it means putting the person who needs us at the centre of designing the approach, not responding agency by agency based on some arbitrary government department delineation of who does what. and it means making sure that what we do is underpinned by the best evidence we can find. So bearing in mind that study I've just talked about, a social investment approach means we need to arrange our family violence system so that when a victim or a perpetrator is brave enough to disclose to someone, to anyone, what's going on, the system is able to support him or her to get the help they need to stop future violence and provide the support needed for the victims, and particularly the affected children, to recover from the trauma they've suffered. So when I talk generally about the potential of a social investment approach, I always say, look, we're not there yet, but we've come far enough that we can see it and the potential that it could offer. And the same is true of a fully integrated, effective family violence system. I'm certainly not standing here saying that we're there yet, but the foundational components are shaping up thanks to the hard work of many of you, and the structure of where we're going is becoming clearer. And that's what I'd like to talk a little bit more about this morning. So I believe what we need is a future system where there is no wrong door, meaning that no matter who a victim talks to about their experience, that person can find the information about what they need to do to help the victim. To keep victims and families safe, those outside what we've traditionally thought of as the family violence system will have access to the information and pathways to know what to do next, and those within the response system will have the processes, protocols, capacity and skills to identify and respond to family violence and work together to keep victims safe. Key government agencies and NGOs will identify and understand their role in responding to family violence, provide leadership and mandate to those on the front line, and support fully integrated practice. For example, justice sector agencies would provide training for all frontline staff, establish specialist family violence teams, and proactively target high-risk perpetrators to prevent violence, while family services will have training on the family violence danger signs and be able to discuss safety strategies with their clients. At the same time, we'd have housing and welfare services fast-tracking financial support and housing support for victims. Family, friends, neighbours and colleagues also have an important part to play. As I've said, we need a system where everyone is equipped with information and skills to confidently recognise family violence and respond appropriately. A system where there's no wrong door will mean that every victim who approaches someone about their experience is heard, believed and helped no matter where they go. So this takes population-level education and easily accessed and appropriate resources to support family and whānau, workmates and friends to know what to look for and how they can best respond if they do see or hear something of concern. The system will then need to know how to respond when these informal calls for help have been made. So as I've said, we're not there yet, we're not where we want to be, and I'm not naive enough to think that getting from where we are to where we could be will be easy or quick. But there's a lot of work underway that's supporting us to get there. The Integrated Safety Response Program, or ISR, that the Prime Minister mentioned, in particular, is showing real signs of being a game changer. It's showing us the full extent of the unmet demand, the necessity for a new approach, and some of the critical components of what our future system needs. Some of those involved in ISR have been quite robust in telling me that starting to deal properly with the complexity of need is causing real challenges as the system reconfigures to respond better. I acknowledge the difficulties and pressures that this has created, but the same people have also been very blunt in saying to me that having seen the difference that dealing with cases of family and whānau violence in this way makes, they can never go back to operating as they did. That tells me that we have to stay on this path. So ISR has been running in Christchurch since July last year and in the Waikato since October. It involves a full complement of the core agencies and NGOs teaming up to ensure that families experiencing violence are getting the support they need to stay safe. They do this by getting around a table every day, sharing information, assessing risk, developing and delivering individual safety plans targeted to people and households they know are at risk of violence, and working effectively with perpetrators to change behaviour. So far, it's helped over 28,000 people in the Christchurch and Waikato through the development of 9,000 family safety plans. And it's clear that there have been cases where death or serious harm have been avoided as a result of the information sharing and an interagency collaboration that ISR enables. So I'd like to share an example with you firstly out of the Waikato pilot. An incident was reported to police by a woman who'd been assaulted by a male family member. The assaults had been occurring since the woman was young. However, this was the first time that it had been reported. The woman had also previously been abused by another male relative, and as a result, that perpetrator was in prison. The male family member, who suffers from multiple mental health issues, had blamed the woman for the perpetrator being in prison. The ISR team got together and held a safety assessment meeting, after which an immediate referral was made to Disability Support Link. This was arranged through Oranga Tamariki and their High and Complex Needs Coordinator. A multi-agency discussion was facilitated through the Family Harm Prevention team with the DHB Mental Health, Explore and Parent-to-Parent support. The male family member was enrolled in an anger management course, and Explore have been making weekly visits to the family, and the Police Family Harm team have also been visiting weekly to keep the family engaged until mental health could take over. The ISR team reported that there have been no further incidents, and the male family member is engaging well. So the difference between this response and a non-ISR response is that the agencies working together were able to make an assessment and develop a plan that best met the needs of the perpetrator while keeping the victim safe. Before ISR, it would have been more difficult to get an accurate picture of what was happening within the family, and it's likely that without the ISR, the assaults would have continued. Another example I want to share also emphasises the importance of information sharing. As ACC claims are lodged by general practitioners, dentists, physiotherapists and DHBs, they often provide the most comprehensive overview of accidents. Following a family violence incident in Christchurch, ACC were able to share their information at the ISR table relating to a young victim. The information provided in this instance detailed a significant claims history, which painted a picture of ongoing family violence spanning the young victim's lifetime. The claim history significantly influenced other agencies' rating of risk, which went from low to high as a result of this information, and ultimately Health produced a safety plan for the victim. So these are just a couple of examples of how an integrated approach should work, each agency recognising their role and working together to keep families safe. The agencies are not dealing with standalone issues that just happen to involve the same family. There is one family with one set of issues, and each agency has to play their part in supporting the solution. The ISR teams in Christchurch and Waikato are making a real difference for families experiencing violence in their communities. But because we're committed to keeping every family in New Zealand safe, we want to see this integrated approach being used nationwide. While early signs are promising, we know that the ISR is still evolving as we learn more every day about how to make it more effective. So that's why we've invested another $22 million through this year's budget to extend and expand the pilots for another 2 years. This enables us to gather more information to perfect the ISR design and understand the proper support it will require to help transition to a national model. In addition, ISR is a model based on responding to police incidents and higher risk corrections releases, and the system needs more than that. Our future state also needs a pathway for self and community referrals, where risks and needs can be assessed and acted on before the violence is escalated to the formal justice system. In fact, it's at that stage we have the greatest chance of making lasting changes to behaviour. So the legal changes needed to fully implement these pathways are part of the Family and Whānau Violence Bill, which is currently before Parliament, and we're working on designing pilots to test these assessment hubs right now. I mentioned earlier that for the ideal future state to be built, there are a number of critical foundational elements that are required. The Family and Whānau Violence Bill that's before Parliament is one of those. The ISR is another. But there are a number of further components that the Ministerial Group on Family and Sexual Violence has been coordinating over the last 2 years. None of these elements should be viewed by themselves. They're all intended to work to support, work as a whole to support and allow us to build a whole new way of working. So anyone who's looking for an announcement that by itself is the solution to this deeply ingrained multi-generational issue is at best naive. What we do know is that for any future system to be successful, one of the foundations that will be needed is for there to be consistency across all the agencies, services and practitioners in the way they understand and deal with family risk. One of the clear messages that's come through in our consultation with the public and practitioners in this space over the last 2 years is that a consistent approach to identifying and responding to risk is a critical component of building a no wrong door model. So today I'm launching the Risk and Assessment Management Framework, or RAMF, which establishes a common approach to screening, assessing and managing family violence risk. Minister Tolley will be launching another of these critical foundational elements in her speech to the summit later this afternoon. Although many of you working in family violence have your own risk assessment and management methods, we've never before had a common approach nationally. And without this, the system is unable to begin operating with a truly integrated approach. This framework aims to achieve a level of consistency and best practice that will better support victims to recover and perpetrators to take responsibility. It supports the no wrong door model by helping to ensure that when people seek help for family violence, whatever path they take, they're supported with consistent professional services that meet their needs. The RAMP has been developed over the last 18 months with the help and input of a wide range of family violence practitioners. And can I say to all those who have taken part in this process that your detailed involvement has been critical to the RAMP being of the standard necessary to fulfil this important role. A critical issue is that currently family violence often isn't picked up until it's entrenched. Or if the early signs are recognised, the system is too slow to respond or responds inadequately, causing people seeking help to disengage. We cannot allow victims to be left to flounder on their own or go without support because they couldn't navigate the system. The RAMP will help establish a more consistent, integrated and proactive approach where victims, perpetrators and their family are well supported through the complex network of agencies, services and practitioners towards a better outcome. It provides practice values and expected generic practice approaches, including outlining a common understanding of family violence. So, for example, for generalist service providers who may encounter victims or perpetrators of family violence as part of their work, but where family violence isn't their core business, so including doctors, nurses, midwives and teachers, there'll be one approach. There'll be another for statutory service providers. So these are agencies and individuals whose core or sole business isn't family violence, but that provide statutory or legal responses to victims or perpetrators as part of their work, like police, court staff, probation officers and some social workers. And then there are the specialist service providers. These are the service providers whose core mandate is to respond to family violence, and practitioners have specialist skills and knowledge, like women's refuge and perpetrator behaviour change services. Some agencies and practitioners, like the police or child protection workers, will of course still develop their own risk assessment tools and approaches tailored to their own practices. But the RAMP will outline broad, high-level expectations to guide the process and ensure consistency. Over the next year, practice guidelines and associated tools and training will be developed for these groups who work with the system on a daily basis. The RAMP's now available for agencies, services and practitioners to review and consider what its expectations might mean for how their current approach to family violence may need to adapt. So this is the chance to test the implementation of the RAMP with early adopters so that we can ensure it's fit for purpose with the aim of rolling it out nationally from next year. And there's a copy for everyone at the back of the room. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're under no illusions that there is a quick or easy fix that will solve our country's horrific rate of family violence. It certainly won't happen quickly, and none of us can do it on our own. But changes and better outcomes are absolutely possible. If we're to truly change people's lives, as the Prime Minister encouraged us to do, and ensure that all children are able to grow up in homes where they feel safe and loved, we need to think differently and we need to work together. So that's my challenge to you as you go away into today's sessions, and I certainly look forward to hearing about the discussions which take place. But I'm certainly acknowledging the parts of the system that government needs to do and think differently about through funding, legislation, frontline response, and providing system leadership. I've committed to make this my top priority for as long as I have the privilege of holding the role that I do. I began this work with Minister Tolley 2.5 years ago as we set up the Ministerial Group on Family and Sexual Violence, bringing together colleagues representing 16 different portfolios who are all equally committed to building a better system. Today's a chance to reflect on the learnings since then, the progress that's been made, and check in on the direction of future travel. Nō reira, kia kaha, kia maia, kia toa tātou, ki te tautoko, te pakari e a tātou whānau. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Thank you, Minister Adams. As is my wont, I was writing furiously as you went, and I gave up after a while. There was so much detail, and I think it's very important that when you go into your workshops, you look at that detail, because I don't want any reinvention of what already has been forecast. And I want to say, Minister, that the one bit that resonated extraordinarily well with me was the refusal to accept that the current situation is acceptable. And I think that's why we're all here today. Nō reira tēnā koe, tēnā tātou katoa. Can I just... Minister Tolley will be speaking this afternoon. Can I just sketch out the rest of the program for the day? We'll invite the 4 keynote speakers up shortly, and they'll address you on various aspects of family violence and the different areas that they are involved in. After that, we'll go into workshops, break for lunch about 12:40, reconvene after lunch, and we'll ask the leaders of the workshops, the facilitators, plus a volunteer from the workshop to debrief us on the key issues from the workshop. This morning I spoke with the facilitators and I asked them if they would talk to you and ask you, if you had the power of the pen and you had the ability to change something, what would be something that you would change to now? What would be an initiative or something that if you had the power to do it, what would you change now? And I'd like each workshop to report back on that particular issue. After that, we'll have the break for afternoon tea. Then I'll summarise today's activity and then hand to Minister Tolley, who will conclude the day. And I understand we're finishing at about 5 to 5, and we'll get in buses and go up to a reception where you can start to talk. You haven't got time to talk today. We're going to be moving. And so you'll have time there to circulate and gossip and talk about the kinds of things that have been talked about today. So could I ask, Minister, could you swap? Or,
Yep, no, I'm going to go down there.
Okay. Can we ask the keynote speakers to come up, please? Oh, no, Kate Baker. On the right. I think the order is Grania, Shane, Sue and Marie. So we can just stretch out along here. As is inevitable in conferences of this kind, it's one way. But your chance will come in a short while once the keynote speakers have addressed and you've gone into workshop. To lead off will be Grania Moss, who's the, well, actually she's not the new anymore. She was appointed formally on the 1st of April. So what I like about, and you all have got their potted CVs, what I liked about Grania's CV is she spent time in Tokoroa. And anybody who spends time in Tokoroa and works with my relations has got to be A1. And since I never heard any gossip about you, Grania, you must have done all right. So I'd like Grania to talk about his topic, and thank you very much, Grania.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Nā mi nuhi kia koutou katoa. It's lovely to be here. My role is to set out the outline of the workshop, which is helping children and their whānau to live without family violence. Now, I think we've been really well set up by the Prime Minister and by Minister Adams' speech. This is actually about changing lives. And I think one of the fascinating pieces of information we have is that people do tell people, but they often don't tell agencies or sometimes even NGOs. And that is one of the things, and I just wanted to acknowledge that there was a launch last night of a programme which Helen Leahy will be able to tell us about and Minister Flavel will talk about. But in it, Sir Mark Solomon talked about silence. And it's silence that can be deadly. So, you know, we are all here because we want to make a difference, and we are making a difference, but we want to make that difference to more people more quickly and at the right time. And we need to be genuine about what those barriers are. And the solution will sit not only with us, will not sit just with government agencies, but it will sit with NGO providers and also with the community. And I did want to take the opportunity, it's the first time that I've been able to speak to you in terms of Oranga Tamariki and some of the work that I see is really important to do in partnership with yourselves and the community. So the first big challenge that I see is that Oranga Tamariki needs to be a better agency. You know, we're very open about that, we're very honest about that. What we need to do is we need to get better at being there to help people at the right time and in the right place. There's some fantastic work that goes on that keeps families and children safer and keeps them healthier and really focuses on their well-being, but it's not consistent enough. So I see that's a real role that I have to play with the leadership team in terms of building a better agency that is more focused on its customer, as the PM said, and hopefully build an agency that we no longer need, that someday the vision of success is we are no longer required. The second part is that, it's not just Oranga Tamariki. Oranga Tamariki's got a very unique mandate. It's got a mandate around being the single point of accountability for vulnerable children, regardless of wherever they are in the system. That's a new mandate that's very clear. It's very clear in the legislation. But whilst it's very clear, it's very complex in terms of managing that and delivering to those expectations. And that's where the multi-agency work is incredibly significant. And I see that myself, alongside my public sector colleagues, need to lead that out. But again, with help, in partnership, particularly with our NGOs. Because if I look at the funding that Oranga Tamariki has, there's actually quite a significant portion that is not spent by Oranga Tamariki on its own staff. It's actually spent with its partners. So it's a partnership with NGOs in the system. It's also a partnership with other agencies. And I see that that burden falls on myself, the other chief executives of the agencies, and the leaders of the NGOs. I think then the third area of work that is really significant is actually families and children and whānau, they're all part of communities. And until we actually change the expectations, the aspirations, and the levels of tolerance within communities, we will not see, the change that we need to see. And that's where I feel that today is so important, because between all of us, we can reach out into those communities and connect them in different ways, in a way that I can't do as the Chief Executive of Oranga Tamariki. Sometimes some of my staff can't do as Oranga Tamariki, but sometimes NGOs can do, sometimes academics can do, sometimes brothers, sisters, aunties, family members can do. But what we really need to look at and be honest about in the workshop is what are the barriers? What are the barriers that we create collectively and individually? And what are the barriers that are out there that we need to collectively join together to push down to get a better outcome for our families and particularly for our children, who are incredibly vulnerable. I just wanted to tell you one little story of success, because I think it is nice when you're on these hard, long, tough journeys to know that there is change being made and there is success. We've launched a little app for some kids. Well, actually, we're piloting with a range of children because we really want to hear what they want to say and what they say is important to them. Now, since the 1st of April, we've had 200 pieces of information through that app. Now, we've never had that before. Never, ever had that direct and transparent and able to see themes from children. Now, one of the really big success stories there is a child who said, I really like my social worker. My social worker is really good. I really like her. I'm really happy with her. So she sent us that feedback. Then what she did is she actually sent us feedback to say, I haven't been able to tell my social worker about what's happening to me, not because my social worker is not good, but because sometimes she's just not there at that particular time when I'm ready to tell. And actually, I feel embarrassed to tell. So by providing the technology, that child has actually come forward and told us all about the family violence incidences in her family, and we never knew that before. So we are making progress. It absolutely isn't enough, and I really look forward to hearing your thoughts and ideas and working with you to make change on this very important and long journey in the future. Now, I just want to let you know I will be around for the vast majority of the day, but I do have a select committee hearing. Lucky old me. So I will be heading off. So I don't want you to think, oh, she's headed off and that's her gone for the day. I will head off to the select committee, and I will, if you don't mind, probably have a little cup of tea by myself before I come back, but I will be back ready to participate in the rest of the day. So thank you very much for your commitment, all the work that you do. I am delighted to be here and delighted to be hearing from you today. So, nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Kia ora, Gron. Well, you know, Gron and I travelled around a bit before she took on her formal appointment to see some of the iwi leaders, and the ways that she's addressed us now directly, unambiguously and to the point is precisely how she addressed and met with iwi leaders, and I think that resonated very well. Certainly resonated very well with me because I'm very difficult to understand complex nuancing, so thank you very much for that. Nō reira e Tarangatira Shane, tēnei te wāhi, kia kōrero atu koe ngā whakaro I roti a koe kia tātou katoa. I must say I was overwhelmed and stunned by when I read Shane's potted CV to see that he'd and his wife Helen had looked after 182 young people. That's just beyond my comprehension, I'd have to say. And I think it's that kind of service that I'm seeing and hearing about in this room, which together we can resolve some of the issues that challenge us. Nō reira, kia koe te marae.
Kia ora koutou. Nā mihi aroa kia koutou me te haerenga ki te wahine, ki te mana whenua o te rohi, tēnā koe me tō koro ai aroha o te ropu nei. Ki nā boss, tēnā koe Sir Wira, me tō keeping us wrangling cats. To my fellow speakers, nā mihi aroha. Ki te minita, tēnā koe e ho, me tō awhi, me tō tautoko, o te kaupapa, kia ora. And to you, kia ora. For those of you who have heard me speak, I generally don't follow notes, I just tell stories. But today, because I've been given a strict limit, I am going to use notes. So I kind of apologise for that. By the time perpetrators and victims reach the justice system, significant personal and social harm has already occurred. We must do something that challenges the status quo so that we can create a groundswell in our nation that is necessary to change the social contract that we all have as a society with violence. I spend a lot of time in countries where you can go out and get drunk and not get punched. It's not in their system. It's not in the way they think. And we have to start thinking differently. To be effective in the long term, we must work with intimate partner violence and child abuse and neglect at the same time. We need each other. We know that victims are proactive help seekers. To intervene early, we need to improve our responses to them. It's ridiculous expecting adult victims to protect their children and themselves and give them the responsibility of stopping their partner's violence. That is nutbar. So therefore, we must respond to both child and adult victims' safety needs. Protecting children means acting protectively towards adult victims, and we have an obligation for that. Anything less is gutless. Nō reira. Victim safety is a collective responsibility. It cannot be achieved by governments, by individuals or individual agencies acting alone, and requires the development of integrated, culturally responsive and multi-layered responses. And this is absolutely critical. In this sense, trauma may be injurious. And there are a number of us in this room that are living versions of this, but it does not have to be the end game. It may also be an opportunity for development, for growth, and for seeing the real beauty that's inside of people. But it requires all of us, and it starts with us. Similarly, people's abusive behaviours do not happen in a vacuum. We have multiple opportunities throughout people's lives, from childhood to adulthood, to model different ways of acting. To prevent family violence, we must work with those people using violence, But it may not be, as the Minister mentioned, work in the formal sense. It could be over a cup of coffee. But we are all part of this system. If people are not going to be violent, then what are they going to be? I mean, have we thought about that? Have we thought, can these people live and work without violence? And I don't think we think about that enough, because in this country, we need to at the moment. And it has been my pleasure to see some extremely violent young men turn into absolute pillars in their society, where they know how to love, they know how to care deeply. And for me, they are the true warriors of the future. People who know how to look after their whānau. You know that old adage, you can tell a Māori warrior by the way he eats his kai. Generally, he will eat last. He'll make sure everyone's fed and looked after. And I think we need to start thinking like that. Changing our collective behaviours requires transformative relationships as opposed to transactional ones. If we really want to make a difference here, we earn the respect of those that we work with in far deeper ways, and we can have real and honest conversations. Changing our collective behaviours and strengthening our connectedness and responsibilities to each other can lay the foundations for prevention in this generation. And I love this notion of the we doing this. This is a we. In a year's time, I don't want this to be a talk fest. I want to hear some measured stories from this summit where people's lives have changed. We don't change anyone. They change themselves. We are just lucky enough to be there and have the privilege to be there. Now I'm starting to preach. We need very clear pathways and tools for those who work with Māori. Intergenerational violence requires an intergenerational response. Many children are born into families and whānau experiencing this intergenerational violence for a whole number of reasons. Protection for those children requires interrupting these patterns of violence and the associated trauma that goes with them. And to interrupt that, we have to create relationships with those people. This is why we absolutely need a system-wide integrated response that is strongly pragmatic and that everyone knows clearly what their job is and how to do it. Family violence is preventable. What will it take to do it? The workforce is large and complex. Whether people are primary or secondary responders, leaders of groups and organisations, or kahukura and the community champions, we need some shared understanding of the knowledge that's required, what excellence looks like, and the actions that need to be taken today in a timely and effective manner. The vision is to have a workforce that, A, has shared practice principles that support them to work together safely. And Minister, I thought you'd read my kōrero. Takes collective responsibility to maximise the safety and support of all of those involved. Can respond safely, deeply and respectfully. Has appropriate cultural knowledge, practice, strategies and alliances, because it takes broader sets of relationships. Has a common understanding and is enabled to provide a consistent, effective and integrated response to victims, perpetrators, their families and whānau. This is possible, and I have to believe that. My youngest moko was 6 weeks old. The next one is 2 years old. In 20 years, when I'm standing at his 20th, if they still have 21sts, I don't want to have this conversation with him. I want him to be able to go out on a Saturday night and be safe in my country. Nō reira, this is possible. We will do it. We must understand the potential of the present now. I'm not interested in navel gazing. I don't have time for it. Excellence is a state of mind that doesn't have to cost a lot of money, but it does require collective capability and a strong will. Anō reira, a tēnā koutou. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Shane. Well, if that's reading notes, I'd like not to see you when you're not reading notes. I just enjoyed the passion and the excitement that Shane portrayed. I'd have to say, when I was 10 years old, I was made a juvenile delinquent and a ward of the state, and my punishment was to be sent to my grandparents to milk cows. I think I would have liked to have come to your house as a ward and stay with you, the way that you've demonstrated your excitement. Our next speaker, we had a meeting of facilitators before this, and Sue, I was very impressed with Sue's background, and I was particularly impressed with the way that she wanted to bring order and structure to this whole arena. But her focus this morning is on older people and the abuse of older people. And in many ways, they are the silent ones as well in this whole process. So I'd ask Sue to come and talk to us about that.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. I do have notes and I will be reading them. It is my great pleasure to be here today. I am going to read from my notes because those who know me will know that I have a lot to say and I only have been given 5 minutes. So today is an opportunity to work together to ensure that the family violence and sexual violence work programmes, wide range of initiatives are inclusive for all people, for older adults, for disabled people, for those adults with complex care and support needs, and our migrant communities. The evidence base is growing worldwide about the extent of abuse of disabled people and older adults, and the systems of protection and prevention that are needed to be developed to counter them. However, without systemic data collection, evidence of the depth of this need in New Zealand is not there, which creates New Zealand's invisible community. Recording information about disability and adults with care and support needs who are victims or perpetrators of family violence would inform the government's social investment approach to identifying who is most at risk, and if the distribution of current investment and the effectiveness of current interventions work for all New Zealanders. If all adults were able to access services to have safer lives at the time they needed to, there would be no need for systems, policies and procedures aimed at addressing the needs of specific groups of people. The people most likely to slip invisibly through the gaps created by the lack of systems and the lack of specialist knowledge in our existing systems are seniors, disabled people, those adults with complex care and support needs, including people with mental health issues, people who identify under the sex, sexuality or gender diversity umbrellas, and our migrant communities. Between July and December last year, the Waitemata District Health Board and the Waitemata Police ran the Safeguarding Adults from Abuse pilot, the SAFER pilot. The pilot aimed to address the gaps that cause critical situations of risks for adults with care and support needs who are experiencing family violence, sexual violence, or any other forms of abuse, neglect, and harm. And because of their care and support needs, were unable to remove themselves from unsafe situations. They're unable to keep themselves safe. I'd like to share with you, if I may, the words of a physically disabled woman who was referred to the SAFER pilot for support. I've changed her name and some details to protect her identity. June has 3 children, the youngest with her abusive partner, who she wants to escape. June wanted to share with me and you, the decision makers she called us, this: my normal is not your normal. The system is broken. It does not work for me. It does not work for my needs, and it does not work for my children. I think this sums up quite succinctly Jude's feelings of fear, anger, and frustration. June's abusive partner is also her main caregiver. June moved to New Zealand with her 2 older children for work and for a better life. She has no family in New Zealand and she is isolated. June has complex care and support needs. She has a neurological disorder, a disease that results in muscle weakness, poor coordination, loss of sensation, seizures, confusion, constant pain, and altered levels of consciousness. For June, accessing the services she needs is extremely difficult, as it is for the services who are trying to work with June and her children to keep her safe. June asked for a navigator to engage with her and her children, someone who understands her unique circumstances and situation and can support her to access the services that they need to address their holistic needs and to provide support in the future beyond the crisis point. It's time for a different approach. The workshop today is an opportunity for you to share your knowledge, your expertise, to put all your ideas about what works onto the table, for us to reimagine a system that safeguards seniors, disabled people, our migrant communities and our invisible community, that enables them to access the services in the form that they need and want and when they want. Before I finish, if I can just share with you a quote from Helen Keller, which is quite close to my heart. Optimism is the faith that leads to achievement. Nothing can be done without hope and confidence. Helen Keller was born with the ability to see and hear, and at 19 months old, she contracted an illness that left her both deaf and blind. Helen learned to hear people's speech by reading their lips with her hands. Helen proved to the world that deaf people could all learn to communicate. If you remember June's words that she wanted to share with us all today, that my normal is not your normal. In your roles, especially frontline services, if your normal is not my normal, then you must find a way to communicate with me that meets my needs, because you can adapt and change the way you do things. This is my normal, and I cannot change. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. Thanks for the compassion that you've clearly demonstrated in respect of older folks, and I want to thank you for that. We'll just take a brief pause at this stage before I ask the last speaker.
Tēnā tuaki nei, ane te mihi ki a koe he ururo, e te mina tane hara mai rungi tēnei hui ngā tātou nei, no reira nau mai. Kare koe he tau hauki tēnei te wari nei, tatu raukura, e titia, pērā no kia parihaka, ana e mihi atu. Mihi atu hoki I rongi tēnei te ahotanga o puanga, ana i pō mai, te nā rā e tū mai, no reira nau mai. Nau mai ngā kōro, nau mai ngā okaro, nau mai hoki ki a koe me oro. No reira huri no he mihi atu, tēnā koe, tēnā koutou katoa.
Minister, you'll have a chance to respond shortly. We just complete this section. Nō reira te tuahine tēnā koe hara mai e rungu te karanga te kaupapa nei, anei te wāhi, kia ora.
Kei te mihi kia koe, Mark. Nā tāua noi mōhi o ke ia tāua I tērā wā hoki hei tua hau I raro I te manaakitanga o te atiawa. No reira, I hoki mahara ki taua wā, kei te mihi ki tēnei whenua, kei te mihi ki a koutou ngā mana whenua o tēnei rohe. No reira, nā tāua I hoki mahara. He mihi tēnei ki ngā kānohi mōhi o ki I tēnei nā. Mo te wā roa e tuaki I a tātou I runga I tēnei kaupapa hei whakaoti pai ngā tūkino. No reira, I tēnei wā, ka tuku mihi kei te tūohu tēnei kia koutou. It's quite a privilege, and I'm going to do one thing before I start, and that's for all of the women's refuge ladies and gentlemen that are in the room, could you please stand up? Stand up, Roma. And I want to acknowledge you, because my kōrero comes from a place from te whāriki mana wahine e ngā kāhui o ngā whare wahine o Waikato /Hauraki. but I want to acknowledge you for your front line and your independent family specialist knowledge. So, kei te mihi koutou. I'm slightly short. Yeah, I've got notes too, because I tend to go all in circles as well, but what I've decided is that I'll give the notes to somebody and they can publish it, but I'm going to follow the kōrero or whai kōrero on my previous three speakers, because they've covered lots of things that we already know. But there are a couple of things that I do want to discuss. And the first thing is this, is that we know when we're welcomed in to a whānau story. We know when we walk into a house and they open up and become their naked truth, how that's our privilege. We know when that wahine actually is finally in our safe house, how she can be at ease. This isn't a new story. We see it every day. The fact is that we have an obligation to protect and serve them. I quite like the kōrero of our minita, or our Prime Minister, is that they are our customer, which is quite sad really, because we're not in the business of misery, we're actually in the business of hope. We face whānau that are hopeless. We face whānau that are confronted with a number of issues that is about being impoverished. Their normal, as Sue just said, is not normal, but it is their natural space of who they are. We quite often walk into their houses and replace their pictures with our assessment of who they are. We quite often walk in there recognising that they need to be something else. So let me help you change. What I want us to recognise today is that we are working with whānau, their story, our privilege. And when we actually get to see the shiny eyes of her children, because they can play safely tonight and know that, oh, I don't have to watch how I do that because Dad's not going to be around tonight. That's our privilege back. That's when we see manamutu hake, and that's when we see them reclaim their space of being safe. It is the same to be said when a tāne goes through a program and realises his own violation of self. When he has hurt his own child without even remember that he is his or her toto. So we're trying to teach people how to operate from a whānau-centric approach. Should I tell you a secret? We're all whānau. We have whānau that we belong to. But one of the reasons why we do whānau-centric approaches is because we've got to find the change maker inside the whānau. We've got to find the truth teller. We've got to find the person that's actually going to say, we belong to this whakapapa and they deserve to survive today. We've got to find that change agent. And that's why whānau-centred approaches actually work. It's because our job is to find that change agent who's going to transform that whānau and remind them that they aren't being normal right now. Because we are working with diverse realities today, which is a bit different to us. So the whanaunatanga of the hōhonutanga of the pūkengatanga is going to work. They don't get it. They don't live in that purest world of us coming from that point of view. But we as practitioners who do know it need to get on board and translate it into their language, their privilege, their story, our right. So I agree with everybody who's spoken this morning, and I know that Tūruru is going to say what he says. But I also know that this is a common story throughout the rohe. And he mihi tēnei kia kaitahu for what you're doing as well. So I stand here to not say to us, let's come and have the same conversation. I stand here and I challenge us to have the audacity to think that we might be innovative today. Because we ask them to be every day. Every time we work with our whānau, we ask them to see this and picture it differently. Should we? And I mean that for both, well, because, you know, there's two teams here. There's NGOs, who we are just fantabulous. And then there's those other people that sit on that side, who apparently are servants to the customers, as I heard from our Prime Minister. So let's just do this together, eh? And relinquish our space so that we can actually come together, creating something innovative and different today. Remember, all of us have had diverse realities and experienced our own stories in this game. Can we kind of like remember that we don't want to play it anymore? That we actually want to see difference. I'm a survivor from way back, and it's a little place called Hauraki. I was lucky to be invited home to become the manager of Te Whāreki Manawahine, or Hauraki. I then got invited to participate in a coalition of 4 stunning women's refuges, 2 being from the National Collective and 2 of us independent, stubborn houses. But what we did was that we created a relationship so that we could stand together and have the 4 independent victim specialist roles for the ISR. Oh, what a learning curve that was. But we learnt. And one of the things that we learnt was that we had to come together to pull our resources so that we could be the best specialists that we could be for our rohe. You know, we have to kind of like strip our armour sometimes. And that's as independent refugees as well. So I think I've used all of my time. But I do want to say that the experiences have been really interesting. And I'm willing to share them, as well as I know that the rest of the kāhui o ngā whare wahine o Waikato / Hauraki would like to share as well. So nō reira koutou, lovely seeing lots of my friends. It's sad that we're still in this space. Nō reira, kia koutou, tēnā koutou, kia ora koutou katoa.
Tēnā koe Hauraki. I'd have to say it's stunning for someone like me who's kind of been insulated from all of the hard stuff you guys do to sit in an audience like that. And I think it's quite right that from time to time, as I think the Prime Minister said, is to take committees and sit them outside the situations that are occurring on a daily basis in our country. And I want to thank you again for the passion that you bring to this whole challenge that we face. Nō rere tēnei wā kia koe te wā e te minita. I want to invite Minister Flavel to address us. Kia ora.
E te whare tēnā tātou katoa, mōrena. Ka mihi kia tātou katoa te timatanga mai o tēnei o ngā wānanga. E hui whakaharahara, me tae mai tātou te motu ka tika, Ke te wete te hohunu tango tēnei kaupapa. Nau mai era rau, hei whai haere te kōrero a Mark, kaore kore i kōrero hia kia koutou haere mai, kia koe Mark, tēnā koe whakatau nei iau, ka amutu kai taku minita, mihi nei kia koe Amy, o tira koutou ngā rārangi waha kōrero i tēnei rā, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora everyone, nice to be with you. I'm Te Ururoa, Minister for Māori Development, awesome minister I might say as well. Oh, sorry, I missed that one. Anyway. I'm sorry I missed all the speakers, but I've heard Marie talking. I know where she's at. And I'm assuming that if she says these other fellows were pretty good, then that's pretty good and enough endorsement for me. I come here from a hui last night, which you might have heard about, where Tūpono Hui in Christchurch, where basically some of the ones that have been working in this sector were celebrated, for Kiwa, and also Sir Mark Solomon. And I want to go back just a little bit firstly, just to acknowledge Minister Adams, Amy, because it was 2 years ago that she stood in front of all the iwi leaders, Te Ao Māori, and said, I want to go hard on this issue about domestic and sexual violence. And I thought her speech was right on the money, to challenge us as a people to do something about this that affects our families throughout the country. But I also went straight up to her afterwards. I said, your speech was awesome, and I want to be with you. I want to be with you on this journey because I have a responsibility to be with you. And actually my heart tells me I've got to be with you. Why? Because actually I've been there. I've seen it, not for a long period of time, long time. Actually, since I was a baby, young little whippersnapper. I told the story last night when I was just a small boy and went to my cousin, my uncle's house and auntie's house. But I've been there when I've heard those pots falling on the ground when the old auntie was chucked against the stove. And I've been there to wake up in the morning and see the holes in the wall. And I've been there when I've seen her come outside of the bedroom afterwards in the morning when she's woken up with black eyes. And I only reflected on it about a couple of years ago when I watched violence on TV. And not as if I'm a TV nerd or anything, but and anything on violence comes up, I either get rid of it, turn it off, flick channels, or I walk out. No, I never thought about it, actually, why I did that. Well, I think it all comes home now when I start thinking about the impact of things that happen as a tamaiti, as a child, that you see, that you feel, that you hear, that impacts on your life. And that's why I wanted to be on this journey with Minister Adams as we had tried to address the scourge that hits our communities. Last night was pretty powerful. I sat in front of Sir Mark and he told the story about what's happened, what they're attempting to do in their areas. So a message I want to say to all of you involved in this sector, the ones from the refuge stood up earlier, but you're all here for a common cause. My goal, my first point I want to say is we are in this together. It's not about government, not about NGOs, not about those who are in the agencies. Today must be about being together and finding the solutions as we go forward. So please drop the goggles, drop the my patch. It's all about all of us being together. There's a part for myself as minister, along with Minister Adams. There's a part for you to play. We want some solutions. He homa, no use bringing you all here together for one day, for 1 hour, the time that you're going to have, and then say, well, that was a good quarter, let's go home. We want some solutions. So the part that we've done, as ministers have said, let's get behind the ISR project, Christchurch and Waikato. We think that there's a possibility of something happening there. But it's our solution. It's our solution. And I've tracked this kaupapa since I've been a minister and since it got started. I've been down there. I've been with the police. I've been out at night. I've been right smack dead in the decision-making table. I reckon I'm as close as I can ever be. Not all. I don't know everything about it, but I'm as close. And still, I don't reckon we got it yet. Why? Because we haven't connected the dots into whānau. So the second point I really want to make is, we've got to start thinking wider about not just the one person in front of you, but we've got to think whānau. We've got to think whānau. It's not just about the child. It's not just about the perpetrator. It's not just about the victim. Because the impact of one incident of domestic violence goes wider. It impacts on the whole whānau. And in fact, whānau can be the solution. If we just pull them in. And I say whānau Whānau and Te Ao Māori, for many of you who don't understand this, is not just about bloodkin. It's not just about bloodkin. It's people that I know that helped me in my time as a young fellow. It's about aunties. It's about the rugby coach. It's about the kopahaka leader. It's about my brother's auntie who looks after him. It's about those people who can give me a hand in my time of need. So we got to think whānau, and I'm pretty sure that that's what Murray talked about. Give us some leads on whānau and involving the whole lot, because it cannot just be about telling the story to everybody else. Actually, it's about solving the problem back the other way. So let's pull the whānau in. The second thing that I think was very important that she put in front of us is around this whole notion of kaupapa Māori interventions. Absolutely. You'd understand that because I'm Minister for Māori Development. I reckon we got something going for ourselves as a people. As a people to do and fix up some of the ills that our people face. We are different. We are different. We have a different way about going about our business, about how we talk to each other. Hell, I know that. When I talk to Pākehā audiences, it's totally different to when I talk to Māori audiences. I'm sorry, but some of you fellas don't get my jokes. But most of my people do. Some. Waikato one's a bit shaky. But listen, the second point, or third point I really want to make is, I think this notion about kaupapa interventions is hugely important and it needs to be put out there. That don't be scared of it. Don't be scared of it. Encapsulate it and include it in the solutions that we're trying to look for today. Last night somebody talked about, and we talk about it all the time on the marae, wahine maa ko koutou te whare tangata. Ne? Kone te tai kore e kōrero ana. Woman, you are the whare tangata. The bearers of our next generation. But we talk about it as whare tangata. The downside is, far too many of our people, as Murray says, don't click to whare tangata. If you don't understand what the hell it means, how on earth can you do anything about it? But if you understand the concept of whare tangata, you understand, bling and leave her alone. Leave her alone. For the next generations. Those kōrero is how we talk about it in Māori. So part of the solutions must be bringing our people back to being Māori. Because the values are there. They sit there. We just got to expand them out and tell it, as Murray talked about, in language that isn't just about whare tangata, but it's actually about the whole concept of what is whare tangata. So I ask you, consider kaupapa Māori interventions. And the last part, because I only got 5 minutes, is that being a Prime Minister, you got some money that we secured to help in this sector. It ain't a lot. Hell, it isn't a lot. But I just want to acknowledge the mahi that you do and hope that some money that we have got is going to be able to help you. Most importantly, the ideas that you get. Look, you had the Prime Minister here. You got 3 ministers, Minister Atoli as well. We're all into this and we want to support. I'll say I'm here to support. Pretty sure that Minister Adams is here to support. But you've got to give us something to go on. The big thing that was said yesterday, actually at last night's tūponohui, was don't worry too much about money e homa. We have the solutions in our community. And I absolutely believe that. Yeah. Ngai Tahu said, we got the solutions. We must own these issues. We must deal with them ourselves. I say, amen to Ngai Tahu. But if you want a hand, and you think that it's not just about those ones who happen to be on the iwi roll, actually, it's about a bigger picture of those who might live in your takiwā that you've got to look after as well. And the issue is so big that I don't know whether we can just stay with that approach by itself. Therefore, I think as ministers, we want to pitch in and say, this issue is so important that you pull 4 ministers to this hui, indeed the Prime Minister. It's got to be something that we all care about and are passionate about. I hope you hear that. I hope you understand it, that we are passionate about this, but we want some solutions and some guidance. If we have to change practice, blink and change it. For us to continue to accept the same old is no longer on the table. We've got to change it, we've got to make changes, and we've got to accept that there are all sorts of ways of dealing with things. Don't just stuck with the tunnel vision. Actually, the kaupapa that I bring to the table and all the people that sit here have been involved in refuge, we bring something that's hugely valuable. It's called an X factor, and it's called kaupapa Māori. Use it, but don't abuse it, and work with us. Let's all work together on this kaupapa. So with that, I wish you well for the rest of the conference. I'm really looking forward to the outcomes of the report that I hopefully, and recommendations, make sure at the end of recommendations, list it. Tell us what you want. Minister Adams will cough up. No, live stream. Oh, oops. Minister Joyce, you'll cough up. No. No, seriously, this is hugely important today. Some of our tamariki and our wahine rely on you people as the practitioners at the top end to give us a line. So don't hang back, use this opportunity, give us some leads. Kia ora tātou.
Tēnā koe te minita. Thank you for those inspirational words, and it really launches us on to the next part of the day, and we're going to break into workshops. There's supposed to be something coming up on the screen. Now, as I understand it, you have a colour on your badge. That's the room you go to. Don't go anywhere else, because I'm going to come around and check your badges. No, he kōrero wēnei. But if you go to your rooms, there'll be morning tea there, and we'll get on with the day. I expect you back here at 1:30 to brief us on the work of your workshops. And after that, we'll have a session, and then we'll start summing up for the day. Are we all clear? And at this stage, I'll ask the media to leave, and they can come back again if you wish to when we reconvene for the session. And can I thank the ministers, the Prime Minister, and the keynote speakers for this morning. We'll conclude this part of our session and move into the work that I know it's going to come from you. Kia ora. Thank you, brother.